My name is Vanessa Clark. I'm 36 years old, a financial director at a mid-sized insurance company in Charlotte, North Carolina, and last Saturday I realized I'd made the biggest mistake of my adult life, funding a family that never intended to include me in it. It was Rachel's wedding, my baby sister. I'd written the checks for everything: the venue, the flowers, the catering, even her dream Vera Wang dress. Over $65,000. 0 cents. All in. Paid from my personal savings. I didn't hesitate when she asked. After all, I'd practically raised her after Mom and Dad died. So when I walked into that gleaming event hall at 4:45 p.m., wearing the navy dress Rachel had approved, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally feel like I belonged. But the usher handed me a program and then glanced awkwardly at his clipboard. "Oh, you're at table 14, he said. "Right over there, next to the sound booth." That's when I knew. There was no place for me at the family table. I wasn't even near it. And yet the worst was yet to come. The last time I saw my parents alive, we were carving pumpkins on the back porch. I was 19, a freshman at UNC Charlotte, just home for fall break. Mom had made chili, and Dad kept telling the same 3 corny Halloween jokes he recycled every year. Rachel was 12, still in braces, and Ben was just 10, more interested in flinging pumpkin guts at Rachel than carving a face. They left that night to pick up supplies for a school fundraiser. I offered to go, but Mom waved me off, saying, "You only get so many weekends like this. Stay." The next call I got was from a state trooper. "Drunk driver, head-on collision, gone instantly." That night rewrote my entire life. I dropped out of school by the end of the semester. Someone had to take care of Rachel and Ben. Our extended family was scattered and emotionally useless. Aunt Linda offered to take Ben, but not Rachel. Grandma said she'd help, but promptly sent a $50, 0 cents check and disappeared. I was 19, broke, and completely unprepared, but I stepped up. We moved into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment. I worked days at a coffee shop, nights at a grocery store, and spent weekends tutoring to make ends meet. I remember eating cereal with water some weeks. Rachel cried every night for a year. Ben wet the bed. I didn't sleep. I didn't party. I didn't live. Very fine. Over time, I got promoted. Moved from cashier to assistant manager, then into an entry-level admin job at an insurance firm. I took night classes, got certified, built a name. Eventually, I became a financial director. We moved into a better apartment. I got them into decent schools. I was proud, not of the title or the money, but that Rachel made honor roll and Ben learned to play piano. That every Christmas had gifts, that every birthday had cake. I was building something real. So when Rachel asked for help planning her wedding, it never occurred to me to say no. She cried on the phone, said she didn't want to settle after everything she'd been through. She wanted a real wedding. I said I'd help. That turned into paying the deposits, then the dress, then the venue, then the DJ. I told myself it was okay. This was family. This was Rachel. One memory that stands out even now was the night Rachel had her first panic attack in high school. She called me from the bathroom floor, sobbing, saying she couldn't breathe. I drove across town in my pajamas at midnight, wrapped her in my jacket, and stayed up with her until morning, whispering that everything would be okay. I researched therapists the next day and paid for every session out of pocket. Then there was Ben. When he didn't make the baseball team sophomore year, he locked himself in his room for 2 days. I took off work, sat outside his door, and read aloud chapters of Harry Potter, his childhood favorite, until he came out and cried in my lap. I bought him a new glove and helped him practice every weekend until tryouts the next semester. I wasn't perfect. I snapped sometimes. I cried in secret more than I let on. I missed out on friendships, on dating, on travel, on youth. But I told myself I'd trade all of that to see them grow up strong, safe, and loved. And for a while, I believed that was happening. Rachel got into Wake Forest on a partial scholarship. Ben joined the community college nearby. I helped both with tuition. I bought Rachel her first used car and co-signed Ben's lease. I didn't even flinch when Rachel wanted to backpack through Europe one summer. I kept hoping that eventually they'd see not just what I gave, but what I gave up. That they'd reach a place in their lives where they'd turn back and say, "We wouldn't be here without you, Vanessa." But gratitude is quiet. Sometimes so quiet, you wonder if it ever existed at all. The moments I treasured most weren't the thank yous, they were the accidental ones. The time Ben sent me a blurry photo of his first A on a math test, with just the caption, "You'd be proud." Or when Rachel posted an Instagram story of the three of us from years ago, writing, "My real MVP." They were rare, but I clung to them like lifeline. And that's why, even when Rachel's wedding turned from small backyard thing to full-blown Pinterest fantasy with floral arches, a string quartet, and a reception that required valet parking, I didn't say no. I thought maybe this was it, my moment, the payoff. The day she would walk down that aisle and in front of 200 guests, thank her sister for being both mother and father, guardian and cheerleader, provider and protector. I imagined sitting at the family table, finally not on the sidelines. I imagined Ben clinking a glass and saying something funny but heartfelt. I imagined feeling like I was home. I should have known better. The first sign something was off came in the form of silence. After sending Rachel the final $12,000, 0 cents for the caterer, I didn't hear from her for over 2 weeks. No thank you, no update, no check-in, nothing. I knew she was busy planning, but it stung. I tried to brush it off, told myself not everything had to be acknowledged. But a tiny knot started to form in my chest, a familiar one. The kind you get when you know something's wrong, but can't quite prove it yet. Then came Ben's birthday. Every year, I'd taken him out for a steak dinner, just the two of us. No excuses. But this year, when I texted him on the 17th to plan our usual night, he replied 4 hours later with, "Can't. Rachel's throwing something. Just family." I blinked at my phone. I stared at those last 2 words, just family. Had I misunderstood? I replied, "Oh, when and where, I'd love to come." No response, for a day. Then he sent, "It's low-key. Not a big deal, just pizza and beer with some of the guys." It didn't make sense. I'd been his only real family for most of his life. I helped raise him. I paid his rent last year when he lost his part-time job, and now I wasn't just family. I told myself not to spiral. Maybe it really wasn't a big thing. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe I was overthinking it, but deep down, I knew I wasn't. And then came the wedding emails. Not to me about me. Rachel had mistakenly forwarded a thread between her and her wedding planner, where they were finalizing seating. She wrote, "Vanessa's table should be near the back, maybe next to the gift table. I don't want her too close to the head table or it'll be awkward with Eric's parents." I stared at the screen. Awkward? Eric's parents had met me twice. I helped fund the very rehearsal dinner they were being honored at. And Rachel, my baby sister, my whole reason for pushing through all those sleepless years, was worried about it being awkward to sit me near the front. I tried to ignore it. I replied to her message like I hadn't seen the email trail. Sounds good. Let me know if you need help with logistics. She didn't respond for 3 days, and when she did, it was about the wine vendor being late. No apology, no mention of the table. Then there was the rehearsal dinner. It was held at this chic little farmhouse bistro with exposed beams and string lights, exactly the kind of Pinterest-perfect place Rachel dreamed of. I walked in and scanned the tables, looking for my name. There wasn't one. After a few awkward minutes, I asked one of the servers. He glanced at the seating chart and pointed. "You're with the vendors." The vendors. The florist, the DJ, and a guy from the lighting crew were already seated there, drinking beer and talking about logistics. I smiled politely, sat down, and swallowed every bitter thing I wanted to scream. When Rachel finally floated over in her designer dress, one I'd paid for, she kissed my cheek like everything was normal. "Hey Ness, so glad you made it. So glad I made it," I repeated. She didn't catch the sarcasm. "We're so close to the big day, can you believe it?" I looked her in the eye. "Did you mean to seat me with the vendors?" A beat passed, then a small strained laugh. Oh God, was that how it came out? "No, of course not. I think someone messed up the chart. I'll fix it tomorrow, I promise." But she did. The wedding came, and I was placed at table 14, near the sound booth. Nowhere near Rachel. Nowhere near Ben. Not a single member of the family sat with me. Just 3 coworkers from Eric's job, who barely looked at me all night. When the toasts began, I held my breath. Rachel stood under the canopy of fairy lights, glowing in her dress, surrounded by love. She raised her glass and thanked everyone who helped make this dream possible. She named Eric's parents. She named her bridesmaids. She even named her college roommate who once gave her a pep talk during finals week. She did not name me. The people I used to be everything to now saw me as a sponsor, an obligation, a credit card with a pulse. A few days later, I stopped by Ben's apartment. I hadn't seen him since before the wedding. He looked surprised when he opened the door. "Oh, hey," he said. "Did we have plans?" "No," I said. "Just dropping off some things you asked for." He took the bag without much warmth. We sat for a bit, chatting awkwardly. Eventually I asked, "Is something going on?" He hesitated. "Rachel said you were kind of emotional at the wedding." I was excluded, Ben. Sat with strangers at an event I paid for. He shrugged. It was her day, Ness. That was the moment I realized I hadn't just become optional. I'd become invisible. But then one phone call changed everything. 3 days after the wedding, my phone buzzed while I was at work. It was Rachel. I hadn't heard her voice since the reception. "Hey," she said, a little too cheerful. "So I just wanted to follow up about the final invoices." I blinked. "Invoices?" "Yeah, there's still a balance with the photographer and the videographer. It's not a lot, just $3,800, 0 cents total. I figured we could wrap that up this week." There was no greeting, no acknowledgement of the seating fiasco, no mention of how I was treated, just a request for more money, like always. "Rachel," I said slowly, "did you even notice where I was seated?" She paused. "Yeah, about that. I told you it was a mix-up." "No, Rachel, you told the planner to put me in the back." "That's not fair, I didn't want any tension near Eric's parents." "Tension," I repeated. "I've never caused drama with his family. I paid for the venue. I helped plan this thing for 10 months, and you couldn't even let me sit with the people I raised." Rachel's voice got sharper. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It was a wedding, Vanessa, not a referendum on your life." I stood up from my desk and walked into an empty conference room before I exploded. Do you even hear yourself? You erased me, Rachel. You let strangers sit closer than your own sister, the one who gave up everything for you. She exhaled, annoyed. Vanessa, you're being really dramatic. My hands were shaking. You used me. She was silent. I continued. You used my grief, my guilt, and my love. You never once said thank you, not for the tuition, the rent, the car, the therapy bills. And when your big day came, you treated me like a vendor. You wanted to help, she snapped. You always offered. Don't make it sound like we begged. That's the problem. I offered out of love, and you turned it into obligation. Then, with the kind of venom only family can deliver, she said, well, maybe if you weren't always keeping score, you'd actually feel loved. That broke me. It shattered the last tiny hope that this was a misunderstanding. Thanks for the clarity, I said, and hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. Then, I took a deep breath and answered. Hey, Rachel just called me sobbing, he said. What happened? I told her I'm done being her bank account. He was quiet. Then, she said you threatened to cut us both off. Not a threat, a decision. There was a pause. Come on, Ness. Don't do this. Ben, I said softly, do you even know how much I've spent in the last 15 years? That's not the point. It's exactly the point. Because when I stopped paying, I stopped mattering. He sighed. Look, I get that you're upset. No, you don't, I said. You don't get it, because for you the money just showed up. You never had to wonder where it came from or what it cost. I wanted to sit at the table. There was nothing left to say. I hung up. That night, I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. There were still 3 automatic transfers active: Ben's rent, Rachel's student loan, and a recurring payment for Rachel's new SUV, totaling $2,100, 0 cents a month. Clicked cancel on each one. Then I blocked both of them on everything: phone, email, social media. The next morning, I woke up to silence. It was the most peaceful moment I'd had in years. But I knew it wouldn't last. By noon, I had voicemails from Ben. You seriously did it? Rent's due in 3 days. What the hell, Ness? Rachel's tone was more emotional. You're cutting off your own sister? What am I supposed to tell Eric? What am I supposed to tell people? Tell them the truth, I wanted to say. Tell them the woman you leaned on finally stood up straight. But that night, it wasn't rage that consumed me. It was grief. I sat on the couch with an old photo album, pictures of us as kids. Me holding Rachel's hand on her first day of kindergarten. Ben asleep on my chest at the hospital when he had pneumonia. My graduation photo. Mom and Dad beaming behind me. They died 2 weeks later. I'd spent half my life building a family that didn't see me anymore. And the worst part? I had allowed it. I scrolled through old text conversations where Rachel called me the best big sis ever, where Ben sent me birthday cards with hand-drawn hearts. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when the love felt real, but somewhere along the way, love had turned into entitlement. And I'd been too afraid of being alone to call it out. That weekend, I packed up a box of photos, cards, and keepsakes and put it in the attic. Not because I hated them, but because I couldn't carry the weight anymore. They'd made their choice. And now, for the first time in 17 years, I was finally making mine. If you've ever been blindsided, drop a below. Because betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the very people you sacrificed everything for. I thought I'd feel empowered. After all, I had finally done it, cut the cord, canceled the payments, set the boundaries. I expected to feel strong, like a woman finally reclaiming her life. But what I felt was nothing. And then came the crash. It started the next evening. I was folding laundry in silence, a mindless routine I'd done for years. But suddenly, I just sat down on the floor. Surrounded by warm towels and unmatched socks, I burst into tears. Not the gentle kind, the ugly, wrenching, chest-heaving kind that leaves you gasping for air. I wasn't crying for them. I was crying for me. For 17 years, I'd been the glue, the fixer, the one who handled the late-night emergencies, the overdue bills, the panic attacks, the bad breakups, the ruined Thanksgivings. I had no hobbies, no husband, no children of my own, just spreadsheets and grocery runs and birthday cakes I baked for other people's milestones. And now there was nothing. I didn't realize how hollow my life had become until the echo of silence filled every corner of my apartment. My phone no longer buzzed, my email was empty, my weekends were wide open, and I had no idea what to do with any of it. That Sunday I drove, no destination, just away. I ended up on an empty stretch of Route 74, with nothing but long road and dying daylight. I pulled over near a gas station and sat in the driver's seat, staring out at a field of dry grass. I asked myself a question I hadn't dared consider in years. Who am I if I'm not useful? It haunted me. I'd built my whole identity around being the reliable one, the rock, the safety net. Now, with no one to catch, I felt weightless, and not in a good way. Like a balloon that slipped out of a child's hand, drifting higher and higher until it vanished into meaningless sky. I called no one. Not because I was being noble, but because I realized I had no one to call. Everyone in my life was either dependent on me or out of reach. I sat in that parked car until midnight. I watched the stars come out, one by one. I replayed every insult, every slight, every moment I swallowed my pride just to keep the peace. I realized how many times I'd rewritten my own needs to accommodate theirs. And for what? So I could be excluded from birthday dinners? So I could be called dramatic for expecting basic gratitude? At one point, I screamed. Not words, just a sound, a raw, guttural noise that startled even me. And in that scream, I felt 17 years of buried exhaustion tear loose like floodwater behind a cracked dam. I cried until I had no tears left. Then, I sat in silence. Silence answered. It didn't comfort me. It didn't reassure me. But it was honest. And sometimes, honesty is all you have. When I finally drove home, the world looked different. Or maybe I did. I slept for 14 hours straight that night. Woke up with my eyes swollen and my chest heavy, like I'd run an emotional marathon in my dreams. The following week blurred together. I went to work, nodded through meetings, pretended to laugh at jokes. But everything felt distant, muted, like I was moving through life in a soundproof box. I didn't cook. I didn't clean. I didn't answer texts from coworkers asking if I was okay. I ordered takeout and left it untouched on the counter. I watched TV without processing a single word. And then, one afternoon, I opened my freezer and found it stocked with meals, Tupperware after Tupperware of the same chicken Alfredo I used to make for Rachel and Ben when money was tight. I had been cooking it in bulk out of habit. Even now, I couldn't stop preparing for people who no longer needed me. That broke me all over again. But the final blow came in a grocery store. I was in the cereal aisle, reaching for a box of Cheerios, when I heard it. Laughter. A little boy giggling, tugging at his mother's hand. He reminded me of Ben at that age. I froze, box in hand, heart thudding. His mother knelt down and whispered, "You're my favorite reason to wake up." I dropped the box. The sound startled me. The boy turned, curious. His mother looked over, politely concerned. I mumbled an apology and fled. I made it to my car before the sobs came. My chest heaved, my vision blurred. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and let every ounce of grief pour out. It wasn't just sadness. It was grief for a version of me that didn't exist anymore. For the girl who stepped up when no one else would. For the woman who gave away her youth so others could have a future. And for the truth I'd ignored for far too long. I had never truly been loved back, not in the way I loved them. When I got home, I lit a candle. Not for calm, but for ritual. I sat on the couch, held the flame in my gaze, and whispered out loud, "You did your best." And for the first time, I believed it. I didn't know what healing would look like. But I knew it would have to start here, in this silence, in this hollow but finally honest place. Recovery didn't come in a grand moment. There was no breakthrough, no therapist epiphany, no dramatic montage with upbeat music. It came in the smallest, most unexpected way. A sticky note. Said, "Coffee later, you look like you need a rescue mission." Tony. Tony was the new IT guy, mid-40s, graying at the temples, always in jeans and a hoodie, even though we technically had a business casual policy. He'd fixed my printer 3 weeks earlier and told a joke so bad I actually laughed, like really laughed, for the first time in days. I stared at the note for 10 minutes. I almost threw it away. Almost. But instead, I scribbled back, "Only if there's muffins involved." We went that afternoon. Nothing romantic, just a walk to the cafe 2 blocks from the office. It was windy, and I remember watching his hair get completely messed up while he ranted about the company's terrible firewall protocols. I didn't understand half of what he was saying, but I listened anyway. He didn't ask about my personal life. He didn't pry. He just talked. And then, he let me talk. And somehow, that was enough. That became a new ritual. Coffee with Tony twice a week. Eventually lunches. Eventually jokes sent by email. He wasn't trying to save me. He just saw me. And that after everything felt revolutionary. One day, he asked, "So what do you do when you're not being a financial wizard?" I froze. Because I didn't have an answer. I didn't garden. I didn't paint. I didn't hike, or bike, or bake. I didn't do anything. My entire personality had been wrapped in others: Rachel's college fund, Ben's baseball tournaments, budgets, timelines, responsibilities. I don't know, I admitted. "I guess I don't really have hobbies." He grinned. "Then maybe it's time to get one." That night, I sat on my bed with a blank notebook. Not a spreadsheet. Not a to-do list. A blank page. At the top I wrote, "What do I like?" It was embarrassingly hard to answer. But slowly, things came to mind. I liked the smell of bookstores. I liked old jazz records. I liked the way my hands felt when they were in the dirt planting something. I liked vintage lamps. I liked cinnamon. I liked quiet mornings where nothing was expected of me. I hadn't thought about those things in years. The next weekend, I walked into a thrift shop and bought a tiny record player for $40, 0 cents. It barely worked, but it had character. I picked out 3 scratched vinyls and played them while cleaning out the closet I used to stuff with hand-me-downs for Rachel and Ben. I didn't cry. Not that time. Instead, I smiled. I even bought a basil plant, just one. I named him Alfred. He died within a month, but still I had tried, and slowly I tried more. I signed up for a ceramics class. I didn't tell anyone, I just showed up, clumsy hands and all. I made a lopsided mug that I still keep by my window. I joined a small book club at the local library. I didn't know anyone's name for the first 3 sessions, but I listened, and they smiled at me like I belonged anyway. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. One Saturday, I signed up for a local volunteer event planting trees along a public trail. My arms ached afterward, but my heart felt full in a way I hadn't experienced in years. The coordinator gave me a small thank you card. I taped it to my fridge. I started cooking again, not for anyone else, just for me. I tried recipes I'd saved for years. Some flopped. One turned into a small fire. I laughed more in my empty kitchen than I ever had with guests. I even began journaling. Not just the pain but the progress. I wrote letters to the younger me, the one who stepped up too soon. I wrote letters to the future me, asking her to forgive the time we lost. I even wrote one to Rachel and Ben, but I didn't send it. I didn't need to. Writing it was enough. One night, while walking back from class, I passed a mother and daughter outside an ice cream shop. The daughter looked maybe 6. She dropped her cone, and before she could cry, the mother scooped her into a hug and whispered, "It's okay, baby." But instead it warmed me. I'd been that woman once, and maybe, someday, I could be again, but this time, for myself. I wasn't healed. There were still nights I missed Rachel's laugh or Ben's dumb jokes. I still reached for my phone, sometimes before remembering they weren't there. But the pain stopped defining me, and in its place, something new began to grow. Not fast, not loud, but steady. Like roots. The first sign that the tides had shifted came through LinkedIn. Of all places. I was sitting at my desk, sipping lukewarm coffee and reviewing a new budget proposal, when I saw the notification, "Rachel Clark viewed your profile." I blinked. I hadn't heard from her in months. Not since the fallout. Not since I'd blocked her number and stopped the payments. But apparently curiosity, or perhaps something else, had brought her to my digital doorstep. I didn't click back. I didn't need to. I already knew the story. Her social media had gone quiet after the honeymoon. The wedding photos had stopped. The gushing captions faded. I'd heard whispers through mutual acquaintances that things weren't going smoothly. Eric had been laid off, and Rachel had been struggling to get freelance gigs in graphic design. But no one dared reach out directly. Until 2 weeks later. Ben texted. Just one word. "Hey." I stared at it for a full hour. And then I deleted it. I wasn't ready. Not yet. But the message had a strange effect on me. Didn't stir guilt like it used to. Bright yellow. Slapped crooked on my office computer screen the morning I got back from a long weekend of pretending to be okay. For the first time, I was the one who held the boundaries. I wasn't chasing anyone. I wasn't begging to be seen. I was just living on my terms. And I had more news. That same week, I got an offer for a promotion. Senior Financial Strategy Lead. A 30% salary increase. More autonomy. My own team. And the best part? I didn't even hesitate. I accepted. I bought myself a leather planner. I started wearing lipstick to work again. I felt more like myself than I had in years. Not the caretaker version, not the martyr version, just Vanessa. At the end of my first month in the new role, my company hosted a networking mixer. I almost didn't go, but Tony nudged me, literally. You worked your ass off. Go, be seen. So I did. I wore a navy blue dress I hadn't worn since Rachel's college graduation. It fit better now. I felt taller somehow, more solid. Ben with Thera. Not as a guest. As a bartender, I recognized him immediately. He had that same crooked smile, that same slouch when he leaned against the counter, but something about him looked tired, a little older, a little lost. He noticed me just as he was pouring a gin and tonic for someone in a suit. Our eyes met. His mouth opened slightly. Ness? I gave a small nod. Ben. He stepped toward me, wiping his hands on a towel. I didn't know you were. I work here, I said simply. He swallowed. You look different. I feel different. There was an awkward pause. He glanced around. Can we talk? I hesitated, then nodded. We stepped into a quieter corner near a potted plant and an art piece I still didn't understand. He fumbled first. I messed up. I stayed quiet. I mean, we both did, but mostly me. And Rachel, especially Rachel. I tilted my head. Why are you here, Ben? He looked down. Because I didn't realize how much I relied on you until you weren't there. And not just the money. How many years? He gave a short, sad laugh. Too many. I let silence settle. Then I said, you didn't just take me for granted, Ben. You rewrote me into someone I wasn't. Someone disposable. He nodded, eyes glassy. I know. And I hate it. And I'm sorry. And for once, it sounded real. Still, I didn't let him off easy. I'm not here to be your sister again, I said. Not in the way I was. If there's going to be any relationship between us, it has to be mutual, respectful, adult. He nodded. I understand. Good, I said, because I'm done raising people who should be standing on their own. He looked down, ashamed but not defensive. Before we parted, he handed me a small piece of paper. My number, he said, in case you ever want to talk, or if you need someone to make you a terrible cocktail. I took it, but said nothing. Later that night, Tony drove me home. I told him what happened. He didn't judge, just nodded and said, proud of you. And I realized I was proud of me too. The tables had turned. Not because I sought revenge, not because I wanted power, but because I stopped giving mine away. A few weeks after the networking mixer, I received a letter. Not a bill. Not junk mail. A real, handwritten letter pressed in a navy blue envelope with my name in neat, careful cursive. It stood out among the usual stack of catalogs and appointment reminders. It was from Mrs. Callahan, my high school English teacher. I hadn't seen her in nearly 20 years. We weren't in touch. But somehow, she'd heard about my recent promotion through a former classmate, and she wanted to write. The letter was short, but it hit me harder than anything I'd read in months. Vanessa, it began. I always knew you'd find your way, even when you were the quiet girl with a million responsibilities and eyes that carried too much worry for someone your age. You always sat in the back row, but I saw you. I remember when you turned in that short story about the girl who built her own wings. I kept it. It reminded me that even the tired ones still dream. She enclosed a copy. A crinkled piece of notebook paper, folded 3 times, with my handwriting loopy, rushed but passionate. The title read, The Girl Who Grew Feathers. I had written it for an extra credit assignment during junior year. I didn't remember much of it, just that it was about a girl who kept fixing things for other people until she finally decided to fly away. I cried, but not because the writing was profound. It wasn't. It was teenage and clumsy and raw. But because I had forgotten I ever wanted to fly. That letter reminded me that the person I had become, the woman now setting boundaries, building a life, creating art, had always been inside me. Even before the loss. Even before I sacrificed so much for people who didn't see me. I hung the story on my fridge. Right next to Alfred the basil plant's replacement, a thriving mint bush named George. That side of me, the dreamer, the writer, the girl who wanted to grow feathers, wasn't lost. She was just waiting for me to remember her. I didn't need to seek revenge. Life has a way of circling back. It started with a message from a mutual friend, someone who had known Rachel from college. She reached out to me through LinkedIn with a simple line, "Hey, I think your sister's looking for work again." I didn't respond, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened Rachel's now public Instagram. The picture-perfect post had slowed to a trickle. Gone were the champagne brunches, the cozy couple selfies, the curated quotes about gratitude. In their place, silence. Her bio now read simply, "Freelance designer. DM for rates." I knew what that meant. Eric, I later heard through office whispers, had never gotten that new job after being laid off. He had tried launching a podcast, then a short-lived consulting gig, and eventually took a job 2 towns over, paying half what he made before. The debt piled up. Rachel tried to keep up appearances, but the cracks were everywhere. One former client of mine, who'd hired her for wedding invitations, messaged me directly. "Did you know your sister ghosted me after the deposit? She never delivered." I didn't defend her. I didn't explain. That wasn't my role anymore. Meanwhile, Ben had moved in with a friend after getting evicted from his apartment. He tried launching a YouTube channel focused on cocktails and pop culture, but it barely cracked a few hundred views. Eventually, he took on 2 part-time gigs, one bartending, one stocking shelves at a grocery store. He sent another message a month later. "Vanessa, can we talk? I'm not asking for money, just I miss you." This time, I didn't delete it. But I didn't respond either. I'd spent so much of my life being a net for people falling from their own irresponsibility. Now I stood still and let them fall, not out of cruelty, but because I finally understood they needed to. Rachel lost more than income. She lost her image. The image she had curated for years, graceful, stylish, adored, was now stained by failed ventures, broken commitments, and missing payments. People stopped hiring her. Friends stopped inviting her. She was no longer the golden girl. She applied for work at the very design firm I now worked closely with. HR forwarded her resume to me for internal reference. I stared at it for a long time. The qualifications were solid, but the memories, the ones she never apologized for, made my hands freeze. I didn't respond. I didn't endorse. I just hit archive. Ben, meanwhile, started showing up at local gigs, small time, low pay, but honest work. He looked thinner, less sure of himself. He still joked when he could, but the shine was dimmer. We crossed paths at the grocery store one evening. He looked surprised. "Hey, Ness." I nodded politely. "Ben." He gave a half smile. "You look good. Different." I said thank you, and we stood in silence for a moment. Then he said, "I know I'm not owed anything, but I want you to know, I'm trying." I believed him. I truly did. But trying wasn't the same as changing, and I needed more than promises. I needed proof, consistency, time. So I smiled, gently, and said, "I hope you keep going," and walked away. The irony? None of it gave me satisfaction. I didn't smile at their misfortunes. I didn't whisper, "Serves you right." I just felt removed, like I'd stepped off a sinking ship and was watching from the shore. They were no longer anchors on my ankles. They were just people, flawed, faltering, and finally facing their own reflections. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. They weren't my responsibility. They never were. It didn't end with some grand finale. There was no tearful reunion, no big public apology, no picture-perfect resolution. Life didn't tie itself in a bow. It simply continued, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't just surviving it, I was shaping it. It began in quiet ways. I stopped checking their profiles. I stopped rehearsing comebacks in the shower. I stopped needing the last word in arguments that only existed in my head. I started sleeping better, eating slower, looking at myself in the mirror not to criticize, but to simply acknowledge. I began to notice what joy felt like in small, ordinary moments. Morning light spilling through the blinds onto my kitchen floor. A stranger's smile at the farmer's market. A good song playing on the radio while driving with the windows down. I had missed these things for years while running triage on other people's lives. Now they felt like. And with each passing week, I felt more grounded in who I was without the title of caretaker, rescuer, or provider. I didn't need to be the hero in anyone's story anymore. I just wanted to be the author of my own. Tony steadily, gently remained in my life. We weren't rushing anything. There were dinners, long walks, inside jokes, and the kind of conversations where neither of us had to play a role. He never once treated me like a project. He never asked for more than I could give. And that, I realized, was the foundation of all healthy love choice, not obligation. One day, while decluttering the hall closet, I found a box labeled 2092016. Inside were artifacts from a different lifetime. Rachel's acceptance letter to Wake Forest. Ben's first baseball cap. A dried corsage from a prom I helped pay for. My chest tightened, but not with regret. But it felt like flipping through an old photo album. Sweet, slightly distant, safe. I didn't throw it away. I simply closed the box, labeled it, then, and tucked it in the back. Some stories don't need to be burned. They just need to be placed on the right shelf. A few weeks later, I took myself on a solo trip to Santa Fe. My first real vacation alone. I stayed in a cozy Airbnb with creaky floors and mismatched quilts. I ate street tacos with too much spice. I wandered art galleries for hours. I even danced awkwardly but freely at a live jazz bar with strangers. One night, I sat beneath a desert sky filled with stars and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of enough. When I returned, everything hadn't magically changed, but I had. I resumed my new routines: book club on Wednesdays, pottery class on Saturdays, long walks without headphones. I wrote in my journal every night, not about the past, but about what was blooming now. I started hosting small dinners, not for show, not for obligation, but because I wanted to gather people who made me feel seen, and they came, not out of guilt, but out of joy. I redecorated my apartment, not expensively, but intentionally. I painted one wall in sage green, framed old jazz vinyl covers, and bought a lamp shaped like a cat wearing glasses because it made me laugh. And laughter, I'd learned, was its own kind of healing. I even got a library card again. On my first visit back, I checked out 5 books and stayed for hours, just wandering the aisles like I used to when I was a kid. I left with more hope than I'd felt in years. Ben texted me again, still trying. Got a new job. Not glamorous, but it's honest. Hope you're well. This time I replied, that's a start. Keep going. Rachel never wrote, and maybe she never will. But for the first time, I don't need her to. Because I finally understand something I wish I'd known years ago. Love isn't proven by how much pain you can tolerate. It isn't measured in how often you say yes, how much you sacrifice, or how far you bend to make someone else comfortable. Real love honors your wholeness. It thrives in mutual respect, not martyrdom. And most importantly, it begins within. I had spent nearly 2 decades proving myself to people who expected me to give, not grow. Now, I give only when it overflows, and it often does. Because these days, my life isn't a performance. It's mine. Messy, quiet, radiant in ways I never anticipated. And as I sat one evening by the window, George the mint plant thriving on the sill beside me, I opened my journal and wrote the line that now anchors my every decision. You don't have to be useful to be worthy. That's the lesson I'll carry with me forever. And whatever comes next from others, from life, from love, I'll face it not as someone waiting to be chosen, but as someone who finally chose herself. And honestly, that's the happiest ending I could have imagined.